Hello everyone and welcome to the Archaeogaming Museum, where today we're continuing our look at the archaeology skill within RuneScape. This is our 6th official video looking at the archaeology skill in RuneScape, plus a couple of streams as well. Although these streams were slightly less focused, in our most recent stream we did introduce 2 new RuneScape archaeologists to the skill and help them through the tutorial. A link to those videos and those streams will be in the description below. But I will provide a brief summary of what we've covered so far. So the archaeology skill within RuneScape, you start at the Archaeology campus just sort of southeast of the rock. And so far we've undergone the tutorial and earned our internship qualification and unlocked the first dig site, Archaeogaming Museum. That we did in our first video. Then the other 4 videos after that have really mainly been focused on looking at Archaeogaming Museum, although we have so far unlocked 2 other sites as well, the Infernal Source and Everlight, both of which will be looked at in their own videos, trying to keep to looking at one site at a time where we can. So in today's video we'll be continuing looking at Archaeogaming Museum. At Archaeogaming Museum so far we've excavated the outside of the site, uncovered the entrance and worked our way into the Zerosian fortress. In the inside we have completed the first puzzle in unlocking the prison door, and now we are going to continue our excavations within the prison. Our main aims in the prison currently are trying to excavate a legatus or legatus pendant and a pontifex ring, as well as just trying to uncover the other artifacts we need to help the museum complete their Zerosian collections, and as well as just general, we don't really call it leveling up or grinding in the videos, we just like to think of it as honing our excavation skills. Honing our excavations skills so we can continue to unlock new parts of the site and new mysteries to solve. So without further ado, let's jump back into the excavation. On Saturday we did just reach a milestone of level 50 in Archaeology. And here we are inside the actual prison itself. We also need to unlock this door as well. That's another part of what we're trying to do. And we need an ancient timepiece for that. So let us start by excavating some of these Presidio remains. These are where we're going to find mainly the artifacts and the timepiece that we need in which to continue our excavations at Archaeogaming Museum. We do cover the history of the site of Archaeogaming Museum in an earlier episode, and I will also post a link to the official wiki page for it in the description below if you want to find out more. But in brief, it is a Zerosian fortress which has crumbled due to war and due to time, and Zaros is one of the gods of the RuneScape. Don't really want to say pantheon because they're not really a pantheon as such, but one of the major gods within RuneScape. Now the aim of these videos aren't to be walkthroughs, they're not designed to be lore guides, they're not designed to be leveling guides, they're purely an archaeologist playing the game, looking at how archaeology is represented as a skill and as a profession, looking at how archaeology is used as a mechanic, and also how archaeology is being used within the game as a mechanic for lore exposition, which RuneScape does very well. It's a good way to explore lore if you're not big into quests, or as an addition to quests, things that maybe the quests don't cover, and it means that you don't have to go and read a million wiki articles elsewhere. The game has a mechanic in there for you to do that yourself. Also, I forgot, in the previous episodes, we've also unlocked the assistant qualification and access to research teams. And a research team is going to be important in unlocking part of the prison in order to solve one of the mysteries we need to do, which will probably, setting that up, will probably be part of the end of what we do today in this stream. Archaeology skill itself, unless you're finding the artifacts or solving the mysteries, it is very much like a resource gathering exercise, so it is a great thing to listen or to do, whilst you're listening to things like podcasts or similar things that you can sort of switch off to, and you can do stuff in the background, which is not how you do, of course, archaeology in real life. Your attention must, of course, be paid at all times to what you're excavating. For example, here, to make sure that I don't stick a mattock through this skeleton's face or ribs, which very much looks like I'm about to do. So in this series, a lot of this will be, as I said, we don't call it grinding, we call it honing our excavation. So don't call it grinding, we call it honing our excavation skills. We or practicing our archaeological and excavation techniques, because a lot of it is getting to the required level for the next section. So not everything I do is necessarily covered in these videos, but we found the ancient timepiece, wonderful. But will be covered on my blog through sort of achievement posts or pictures on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. So do go and follow the Archaeogaming Museum there as well. So as well as sort of excavating these remains, we can survey them, and they'll tell us what requirements we need, and B, what we're likely to find in terms of materials and damaged artifacts. So again, this kind of represents an archaeologist's knowledge about where they're excavating, previous research that has been done, either historical or by others, or your desk-based assessments or desk-based surveys before you go into the field, to give you an idea of what you expect to find, or indeed just sort of level surveying and test pitting and so forth on site, which is a nice little mechanic. Also, RuneScape has some really nice music that you can listen to whilst you do it. I hope you can actually hear that. Let's turn it up a bit. So, the main things I said we're looking for are the ancient timepieces, the Legatus pendant, and the Pontifex ring. And that will kind of set us up for the next things that we need to do in order to progress at the Krid et site. If it becomes too difficult due to needing to hone our excavation skills elsewhere, we may start looking at some of the other sites in order, and then come back to Krid et. But we'll see. Our level progress is actually not too bad at the moment. We're a little way into level 50. And keeping effects on the chrono sprite does help with leveling. It's nice. It would be nice to have, little magical sprites in real life sites which will tell you where, best to dig at a particular time. But there we go. The wonders of excavating in a fantasy world. For those of you who might not be aware of what RuneScape is, RuneScape is was a browser MMORPG. It now mainly has a dedicated client. That first came out in 2001. And archaeology is one of the most recent skills added to a variety of skills set within this fantasy world. A fantasy world of quests, of monsters, of skills, and quite an interesting economy. probably has one of the better economies of MMORPGs that are out there, with a dedicated in-house or in-game, sorry, auction house. Obviously, other games like World of Warcraft and other MMORPGs have something similar, but I think maybe just out of general preference, I prefer the one within RuneScape. So of course, Archaeology is not the main focus of RuneScape. It is a fantasy game. Archaeology is a skill they introduced for as a resource gathering skill for the most part, in order to unlock new abilities, new areas, new quests, as well as a way of exploring the lore. And it's quite a good skill to introduce for that purpose. I just had to point out at this point, this game is not sponsored in any way by Jagex, the developers of RuneScape. However, if they wanted to sponsor videos, I'd not say no either. But even if they were, I'd still give my honest critique, my honest opinion of what it's like. Obviously, there are some issues with the skill as portrayed in RuneScape. Ooh, my sizing's gone a bit weird for some reason. Let's just correct that. I only just noticed that, so sorry if for part of that video my screen was cut off and you weren't able to see what was going on. Not sure what happened in that instance. But yes, I'd always give an honest critique, even if I was being, or honest opinion, even if I was being sponsored. Obviously, Archaeology, it has some issues. There's some things that are missed. There's some things that, because it's sent in a fantasy world, it sort of has to focus on. Such as when you are sort of undergoing the tutorial, asking why you may want to get involved in archaeology. The main things, of course, that they focus on are, well, the first three things they mention are power, fame, and wealth. However, as one of the four major reasons that they do talk about why you might be interested in archaeology, they do talk about the stories as well, about uncovering stories, solving mysteries, which is why a lot of people who generally get into archaeology get into it for. You definitely don't get into archaeology for the money, despite what some people think. Archaeologists do not steal the best treasures for themselves and then sell them on or make money off them. Most archaeologists, if you see what they wear weird striped knitted jumpers, big floppy hats, cargo shorts and jeans, and really old boots. Definitely not the attire of someone who generally has a lot of money. Archaeology is definitely a profession you get into because you love history, you love getting your hands dirty, you love storytelling, you love solving mysteries and puzzles. It's definitely not like Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider. It's interesting because there was a study which looked at admissions, archaeology admissions into universities, and there was a direct correlation with the people wanting to study archaeology after the Indiana Jones movies. Thinking, oh, you know, this is what archaeology's like. This is what archaeology's like. It's definitely not my reason. I think my main inspiration as an archaeologist was probably when I was younger, was probably Tommy Pickles from the Rugrats. As well as just a general love for history and the past in general. So I said, you know, the in a way, you know, the game itself is quite a good simulator for what could be seen as the monotonous parts of archaeology, where you're just digging and you're not really finding anything, or not finding necessarily what you'd expect. So it's quite accurate in that respect. But, you know, it gives you a chance to, as I say, catch up on podcasts, go and make a cup of coffee, do stuff in the background, or indeed make videos about it and talk to other people about it as you do it. Only weirdos would do that. So you might also ask, you know, why look at Archaeogaming? Why look at archaeology from RuneScape? Why is it useful? Well, I mean, it's always interesting to see, as an archaeologist, how your profession's skill is being represented, especially with archaeology, where there's a lot of misconception about archaeology and about what archaeologists do. You know, archaeology is very much out there in various different cultural forms through movies, TV series, games, and so forth. And in a world at the moment where there appears to be a rise in conspiracy theories and anti-intellectualism and rejection of experts, or that certainly, you know, often seems to be the case, then having a look at how things are being portrayed and the public perception of that is quite important in order to maybe address some of those issues. I have to say the big disappointment, I've said this I think in several videos about how archaeology is portrayed in RuneScape, is the lack of hats. Not necessarily hard hats, I'm not necessarily thinking about health and safety, although health and safety in this is definitely to be left to be desired. But, you know, part of the archaeologist's uniform is a hat. Very important. And obviously we're having a bit of an archaeology crisis in the UK at the moment, with various university departments under threat, such as Sheffield and Chester in particular, and some archaeological units such as Norfolk, due to government cuts and funding, the knock-on effect of Brexit, the pandemic, and a whole load of other things are really influencing or impacting on the profession at the moment. But archaeologists also look like they're going to start playing a more of a part in Star Wars. That archaeologists are going to start to replace some of the role that Jedis have in canon as keepers of lore and keepers of history within the galaxy, in the Star Wars galaxy, in the Star Wars universe. Especially in the canonical material after the Revenge of the Sith. In the Vader series, a character called Dr. Aphra has been introduced, who takes on part of that responsibility, because with the Jedi gone, who and archaeology to a certain extent was very much part of a Jedi's role in protecting and preserving the mysteries of the galaxy and the cultures of the universe. Of the galaxy at least. With them gone, other people are going to have to fill that void. And myself, I've just been playing Jedi Fallen Order recently, and you certainly do spend a lot of your time in old tombs and temples and ruins. Not necessarily with the best archaeological intent or practices, you know, lots of jumping all over them, breaking bits, blowing bits of it up, you know, But that does very much appear to be how archaeology is done in the Star Wars universe, especially the Empire's approach to very much a Victorian approach as well. We're not interested in any of this stuff, we just want this. So what's the quickest way to get there? Let's blow a hole in it. I think that's part of the criticism of Time Team as well, especially in the later episodes, in the later series, where it appeared that they were just digging through a load of earlier stuff and just discarding it because it's not what they were there to discover. Which of course is not really or exactly the case that was happening there. So far we've only found the timepiece so far. So as I said, this is very much a waiting game, very much representative of archaeology, where you are for the most part just sitting in the dirt, playing in the dirt. An excuse to play in the dirt as an adult. Not that you necessarily should need an excuse, but it is a good excuse at least. Got fellow archaeologists here with some very fine rings. And of course this would not be very good archaeology etiquette if you just go up and randomly start digging in a section where someone else is digging, especially without asking their permission. Archaeologists get very protective about that. And just as I said that, we found one of the other objects that we need for the next part of our exploration and excavation of the Al-Kharid fortress prison. So now we're just after a Pontifex ring. And potentially we might need to do some further excavation to uncover some of the materials that we'll need to help piece these objects, these artifacts back together. As I've mentioned previously, not normally the job of an archaeologist. Sometimes, some basic conservation and restoration may be undertaken by post-excavation archaeologists, but that is generally left down to conservators and curators, not to the archaeologists themselves, normally. And again, about halfway through to the next, or since we started, halfway through from the point in which we started to the next level as well in archaeology. So got about 20 minutes, I'd say, to see if we can find it and to restore it. So maybe we'll continue to dig for the next 10 or so minutes to see if we can uncover it. If not, I might have to wait till the other video, or maybe it's something that I will try to uncover for the next video, which will be released sometime next week. My schedule, unfortunately, is a bit up in the air at the moment. I've recently been helping one of my local museums, Andover Museum, with reopening and helping them get back into welcoming visitors into the museum again, which has been really rewarding. It's been great to get into a museum and talk to people, talk to members of the public. Of course, with all the correct protocols for COVID-19 in place, but it has made my weeks a lot more busy and a bit more uncertain. So the schedule, I'm sorry, has been disrupted a little bit. Still trying to figure out, for example, a day for streaming, either streaming RuneScape or some other games. I've got a whole list of other games to look at the moment. One of my other series I'm doing on the channel at the moment is looking at games which are created about COVID-19 and 2020/2021, looking at them as artifacts of COVID and artifacts of those years, and what they might be able to tell us in the future of what archaeologists or researchers of the future of what 2020 and 2021 were like. And exploring the idea now that, you know, we are in an unprecedented time where we can create games almost immediately, or any form of media, records to reflect the current events that can be disseminated to a large amount of people very quickly across the world. Our technology is advancing so quickly that, you know, this allows for these kind of things to happen, which means archaeology also has to move with that, and the time periods that archaeology deal with can become a lot more modern, can become a lot more recent, which has sort of led really to archaeogaming and more recent sort of archaeology of technology, such as computing, the archaeology of phones, for example. All these things now, with things becoming out of fashion or obsolete so quickly, allow for archaeologists to study newer materials, newer artifacts from the more recent past. Right, so we're now going to have to go and do some screening because we filled up our soil box, which is like our portable spoil tip, if you like. Screening is, unfortunately, appears to only at the moment be accessible at the Archaeology Guild campus. However, a big site like Al-Kharid, for example, if that was a real archaeological site, would likely to have some screening material at least available on site. I mean, sometimes it is reserved for laboratory because there you're able to catch anything that you don't miss and less of a risk of contamination potentially. But a lot of sites, you know, screening is also done on site. Kind of depends on the dig to a certain extent. But it's very much a good thing that they've decided to put into the game. I keep on going about this in all my videos, but the fact that screening is in the game, you know, it is a real important part of actual archaeological excavation. And although ideally actually in excavation you don't actually want to find anything in the screening, no, not artifacts anyway, great for environmental evidence, pollen, seeds and so forth, and small bits of food and bone debris. Ideally you don't want to find artifacts in that, and luckily this is represented with a low chance of finding artifacts within the screening process in RuneScape. I doubt though this is necessarily built in to be an accurate portrayal of archaeology as such, but more as a mechanic to make it not too easy to find them. So, you know, it gives you a tiny chance to reward you for doing a lot of screening, but also, you know, they keep it at those low values so you don't, so it's not too easy for you. Keep it a challenge. So at the moment my archaeology soil box can only store 50 soil samples, but that can go up, that can increase as you level. You can increase that. At the moment I'm limited to that. So if we wanted to restore these, let's see what we need. We can inspect them to see what we need. Okay, yeah, we currently have everything we'd need to restore the ancient timepiece. And how about the legatus or legatus pendant? No, we need one dragon stone, which we were likely to have to go and buy, because I don't think you're able to find that from just doing the excavating. And it's quite useful here, also tells you which collections these are likely to be important to, but obviously that's fine if we find extras. For the time being though, what we really need to do, what we really want them for is for unlocking new parts of our excavation. So let's go back and maybe do a bit more excavating, and then look at least restoring the ancient timepiece, and maybe the Pontifex ring, although I have a feeling we may need something extra for that as well. But that is something, as I say, I can do behind the scenes, and then I'll post about it on my social media. And then that means next time we can kick off with something hopefully a little bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting, solving some mysteries, unlocking some new areas, and continuing our excavations of the site. So we're going to go in, we're going to do about 10 more minutes, I guess, of excavation. And then do a little bit of restoration, conservation and restoration, and then we will leave this video here for the time being. I keep on forgetting I can go directly into prison, I don't have to keep on going to main fortress first. And then we'll pick it up again sometime next week, likely on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Although if I get a chance to stream over this weekend, maybe I'll do a little bit of streaming and just hone in my excavation skills, hoping to uncover what we need, and also restoring those artifacts, and maybe playing some of those other games that I am looking at, or at least briefly explore them on stream. Definitely, I've got so many videos that I planned. There's ones which I want to do on Heaven's Vault, Never Alone, Valheim, Archaeogaming, some of the Assassin's Creed games at some point, but I've kind of been leaving them alone, mainly at the moment, because they've been covered by so many other people, and so many people whose areas they sort of, that's their speciality, that's what they do, and they're not my specialities. So, sort of wanting to leave them to them because I enjoy watching them, and I don't think there's really much I can offer, certainly in terms of the actual history itself, maybe how it portrays history and how it does things like that, because that's something that interests me and I like to talk about. And there's also various VR things that I have on the horizon as well, and now having a machine that can cope with recording those VR experiences, those hopefully will be some interesting videos as well. Got a short one planned for maybe in a couple of weeks, looking at Shavu Cave, which will hopefully form as a part, as a follow-on from one of my previous videos where I looked at a very short indie developed game, looking at cave paintings, looking at Mammoth, the story of the mammoth as really an entire species, and their interaction of humans, which it tells in about 5 minutes. Again, I'll link that in the description below, and there'll be links somewhere at the top or around the screen at the end of the video as well. Look for the end card at the end of the video, and there will be links to the other videos there. But Heaven's Vault is certainly a game I've been enjoy playing, especially the hieroglyph translations. I found it very fun. Never Alone, I think, is a wonderful example of a game, of sort of game developers, and especially indigenous communities, coming together to portray a culture, especially what is mainly an oral culture, in a very different way, and in a way that hopefully a lot more people might experience, I guess kind of by accident to a certain extent. You know, it's not just museums, or indeed virtual museums, which still may have a limited footfall, but by creating a game which sort of intrinsically works those ideas into the gameplay as part of the game story, and it's done in conjunction with those indigenous communities and with their cooperation, and as a way of helping those old traditions survive, those histories, the folklore. I think that's something that gaming should embrace more, and games really are a great medium for the dissemination of information in that kind of way. Not that there shouldn't also be virtual exhibitions, other exhibitions either virtual or museum based, or however other people want to portray that information, but games should always be considered as well. Games can really be a serious way of getting good, factual and interesting information across, in forms of edutainment, which is a term I quite like. And potentially making it accessible to especially younger people more easily. But to everyone, really. Games are not just for young people. I think, you know, what has really helped with gaming is the COVID-19 pandemic in a sense, because people are starting to, society is starting to value and realise how much or how helpful gaming can be as a coping mechanism to these kind of issues. I mean, it's a shame that it's taken a large-scale global pandemic to prove that. But you know, gaming really can be a coping mechanism for people, and that is important for us to remember. You're not just childish or immature because you play games. There are childish and immature games out there, of course. I've even looked at a few on the channel as part of looking at creating games developed by COVID. The one which immediately springs to mind is the 2020 Pooping Simulator. But although it is a very silly and immature game on the face of it, it is still very much, you know, representing a very serious topic and very real emotions of people. Emotions of not just of the developers, but also representing maybe larger societal emotions and feelings. And as a game, it's reasonably cathartic. You just launch poop at the year 2020 and there's some hidden bits in that game as well. It's not really a game I looked in isolation, it's a game I looked at on stream. I may do a completely separate video on it at some point, but it's in one of the streams that I mentioned at the beginning, which were more started off being more focused on RuneScape and the archaeology skill, but then moved on to look at other things. One of my regulars on the channel, Nelson, joined me for that one, and we discussed various things to do with gaming. So that was a really good experience, and again has been a result of the pandemic for me, is starting this channel and doing these sort of videos, this kind of content. And although it is something that I'd sort of been doing on my companion blog, Coffee Break Archaeology, sort of, you know, in a way, it was the COVID pandemic which gave me the motivation to continue or to restart and rethink about how I do it. So, what we'll do is we'll just fill the inventory once more, or half fill it. And then we're going to go and restore the timepiece, and then I think we'll probably call the video here for today. Don't want to make these videos too long. Oh. Sorry about those notifications sounds. I thought I had turned those off. So just got a few more spaces to fill. I still haven't turned those off. Oh, we found another Legatus pendant as our final piece. Well, there we go. Got one to hand in for a collection and one to help us with our excavations. There's potentially 3 collections that we could actually add to the museum. Of course, is the first most important one. As you know, that object should belong in a museum. Sorry. And some of these other collectors that you can provide these or give these objects to obviously represent bits of archaeology which maybe are not the most savoury, because they're adding them to people who aren't necessarily they're not museums, they're not educational institutions who might use these objects. These are people within the world who might be using them for slightly nefarious purposes. So this kind of represents the maybe the black market for the antiquities trade, which is very important to be aware of, but showing sort of archaeologists directly dealing with that, not ideal, because we don't, or certainly reputable archaeologists don't. There are some people out there who may call themselves archaeologists who do, but they will not be representing archaeology as a whole, as part of institutions or organisations. Still not managed to turn off that notification. Thank you. Hopefully that's done it. So what we're going to do is, actually no, we'll go, I was going to do it here, but let's actually go back to the guild, because it means we can also finish off with this screening just to get all the soils out of the box in the inventory. Then we'll do the restoration, and then that will be the end of the video. Okay, now that's all that. So we are done with that. So now we'll just need to deposit those, and let's restore this timepiece. And we'll need to find some dragonstone, some cut dragonstone gems in order to restore these 2 pendants. And we're still after that ring as well, the Pontifex ring. Oh, we were so close to leveling up as well. But, as I said, we'll leave that for the that's the end of our excavation, our time on site for today. Slowly making the progress on site. I'm hoping to hopefully do a little bit in the background, so by next week we can jump into the next bit of the excavation. But as I said, I'll post any new updates regarding that on my social media pages. Please do go and follow the Archaeogaming Museum on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Also, if you haven't already, please also follow my companion blog, Coffee Break Archaeology, on those same social media channels. If you've enjoyed today's video, please consider giving it a like, and also consider going and watching some live content, which should be up around here on the end card somewhere. Also consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell to find out when I upload or go live next. As I said, it may be a stream this coming weekend. Not sure yet of the day or the time, but I'll post on my social media channels when, and if you hit that notification bell, go and select all notifications, you'll get notified of when I go live. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, thank you and take care. Bye bye.